Sarah Martinez stepped off the bus at Camp Pendleton, her worn duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and her civilian clothes marking her as different from everyone else. At 28, she looked younger than her age, with shoulder-length brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail and wire-rimmed glasses that gave her an almost scholarly appearance. The other recruits gathering for the private military contractor orientation towered over her 5'4" frame, their muscled builds and confident swagger making her seem like she had wandered into the wrong place entirely. "Hey, you lost?" called out Marcus Thompson, a former Marine whose biceps strained against his tight black t-shirt. His buddies chuckled as they sized up the newcomer. "The library's back in town, sweetheart." Sarah adjusted her glasses and smiled politely. "I'm here for the Blackwater orientation. Same as you, I think." Her voice carried a slight Texas accent, soft and unassuming. She pulled out her paperwork, double-checking the address even though she knew she was in the right place. The laughter grew louder. "Blackwater?" said another recruit, a tall man with a shaved head covered in tattoos. "Lady, this isn't some corporate team-building retreat. We're training for combat missions in Afghanistan. Real dangerous stuff." "I understand," Sarah replied, her tone remaining calm and friendly. "I've read the job description thoroughly." Marcus walked closer, his expression mixing amusement with condescension. "Look, I don't know who told you this was a good idea, but this company only hires the best. Former Special Forces, Rangers, Marines with combat experience. We're talking life and death situations here. What's your background? Administrative work? Maybe some weekend paintball?" Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus cut her off. "Let me guess. You saw too many action movies and thought it looked exciting. This isn't a game. People die out there." The group had gathered around now, a circle of imposing figures looking down at the small woman with curiosity and barely concealed disdain. Their instructor, a grizzled former Army sergeant named Bill Crawford, approached with a clipboard in hand. "What's the holdup here?" Crawford barked, his voice carrying decades of military authority. "Just wondering if this lady got off at the wrong stop," Marcus explained, gesturing toward Sarah. "She seems a little out of place." Crawford looked Sarah up and down, taking in her unremarkable appearance and civilian clothes. His expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught the slight doubt in his eyes. "Ma'am, you here for the contractor program?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, handing over her paperwork. "Sarah Martinez reporting for orientation." Crawford scanned the documents, his eyebrows raising slightly at something he read. "Says here you have prior military experience, but no details. What branch?" "Navy, sir," Sarah answered simply. "Navy?" Marcus scoffed. "What did you do, cook for the sailors? Maybe handle paperwork on a ship somewhere safe?" Sarah's expression didn't change, but those who looked closely might have noticed her posture straighten almost imperceptibly. "I served where they needed me, sir." Crawford studied her for a moment longer, then shrugged. "All right. Everyone inside. We've got a lot to cover." The orientation took place in a large warehouse converted into a briefing room. Folding chairs were arranged in rows facing a projector screen. As everyone filed in, Sarah noticed how the other recruits naturally gravitated away from her, clustering together and speaking in low voices about their military backgrounds. She heard fragments of their conversations, stories about firefights in Iraq, special operations missions, years of combat training. 18 months in Fallujah, one man was saying, lost half my squad to an IED on my second tour. Ranger school was nothing compared to actual deployment, another added. You don't know what you're made of until bullets start flying. Sarah took a seat in the back row, pulling out a small notebook and pen. The action drew more amused looks from nearby recruits. "Taking notes already?" whispered a woman sitting 2 rows ahead. She was one of only 3 other female recruits, and easily the most intimidating. Tall, muscular, with short-cropped blonde hair and scars visible on her arms. "This isn't college, honey. Just want to make sure I don't miss anything important," Sarah replied with another polite smile. Crawford began the briefing by explaining Blackwater's mission in Afghanistan. They were hiring private contractors to provide security for supply convoys, protect government officials, and assist with training local forces. The pay was excellent, 6 figures for a 1-year contract, but the risks were real and immediate. "I won't sugarcoat this," Crawford said, clicking through slides showing destroyed vehicles and casualty statistics. 3 of our teams took fire last month. We lost 2 contractors to sniper attacks, and another team had to fight their way out of an ambush that lasted 6 hours. This isn't about the money. If you're here for easy cash, you're in the wrong place. Sarah scribbled notes while others nodded grimly. She wrote down tactical details, mission parameters, and equipment specifications with the focused attention of a student preparing for finals. "The selection process starts tomorrow," Crawford continued. "Physical fitness test, weapons qualification, tactical scenarios, and psychological evaluation. We're only taking 12 of you. The rest will be sent home." During the break, Sarah found herself standing alone by the coffee machine while the other recruits clustered in groups, sharing war stories and comparing credentials. She overheard Marcus talking to several others about her. "I give her half a day," he was saying. "Soon as she sees what real training looks like, she'll be crying to go home. I don't know how she even got invited to this thing." "Maybe it's some kind of diversity hire," suggested the scarred blonde woman. "Company trying to look more inclusive or something?" "Diversity hire that gets us all killed," Marcus replied. "You can't fake combat experience. When the shooting starts, people like her become liabilities. Dead weight that puts everyone else in danger." Sarah stirred sugar into her coffee, her expression unchanged. She had heard similar conversations before, in different places and different contexts. The doubt was nothing new, nor was the assumption that her appearance told the whole story. That evening, recruits were housed in temporary barracks, long rows of bunk beds in a converted warehouse. Sarah claimed a bottom bunk near the far wall, unpacking her simple belongings into a small locker, while others engaged in loud conversations about their expectations and concerns. She sat quietly on her bed, reviewing the day's materials. "You sure you're in the right place?" asked the woman from the next bunk over. Her name was Kelly Peterson, a former Air Force security specialist with multiple deployments under her belt. Unlike the others, her question seemed genuinely curious rather than mocking. "Pretty sure," Sarah replied, looking up from her notes. "It's just, this isn't like anything you've done before, you know? Even for those of us with experience, it's intimidating. What made you decide to apply?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I thought it might be time for a career change." "From what?" "Teaching," Sarah said after a pause. "High school mathematics." Kelly's eyes widened. "You're a teacher? And you want to become a private military contractor in Afghanistan?" "Former teacher," Sarah corrected gently. "And yes, I understand the transition might seem unusual." "Unusual?" Kelly sat down on her own bunk, facing Sarah. "Lady, it's not unusual. It's insane. Do you have any idea what we're signing up for here? This isn't some adventure vacation. People are going to be shooting at us. Real bullets." "I've given it considerable thought," Sarah replied, her tone remaining calm and measured. Kelly shook her head in disbelief. "Look, I don't want to be mean, but have you ever even held a gun? Been in a fight? Hell, have you ever been in a situation where you had to make split-second decisions that could get people killed?" "Once or twice," Sarah answered simply. "Once or twice?" Kelly's voice rose slightly. "This isn't a joke. We're talking about combat zones, terrorist attacks, people trying to kill us every day. You can't just decide one day that you want to be a warrior." Sarah closed her notebook and looked directly at Kelly. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a depth and intensity that seemed at odds with her mild exterior. "I appreciate your concern, Kelly, really, but I think I can handle it." The next morning arrived with Crawford's booming voice at 5 a.m. "Rise and shine, ladies and gentlemen. Time to separate the wheat from the chaff." The physical fitness test began at dawn. Pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, and a timed 5-mile run in full gear. Sarah changed into simple black workout clothes that hung loose on her frame, making her appear even smaller next to the others in their form-fitting athletic wear. Marcus stretched nearby, his muscles bulging impressively as he prepared for the test. $20 says teacher lady doesn't make it past the first mile, he announced to his growing circle of admirers. "I'll take that bet," said another recruit. "She looks like she might pass out just putting on the gear." Sarah strapped on the 40-pound pack and adjusted the weight until it sat comfortably on her shoulders. She tested the fit with a few small movements. Her motions economical and practiced in a way that went unnoticed by the others. The pull-up bar was first. One by one, recruits stepped up to demonstrate their upper body strength. Marcus cranked out 25 perfect repetitions to appreciative whistles from the crowd. Kelly managed 15 solid pull-ups, earning respectful nods from the men. When Sarah's turn came, conversations quieted. She stepped up to the bar, her small hands gripping the metal with calluses that spoke of more than academic work. Without hesitation or visible effort, she began pulling herself up. Her form was textbook perfect, full extension down, chin clearly over the bar up. She moved with a steady rhythm that seemed almost mechanical in its consistency. 5 pull-ups, 10, 15. The conversations stopped entirely as she continued without showing signs of strain. 20, 25. She matched Marcus's count and kept going. 30, 35. At 40 repetitions, Crawford called a halt. "That's enough, Martinez. Save some energy for the rest." Sarah dropped from the bar, her breathing only slightly elevated. She wiped her hands on her shirt and stepped back without any visible satisfaction or smugness. The other recruits stared in stunned silence. "Holy shit," someone whispered. "Where did that come from?" Marcus's confident grin had faded into confused disbelief. "Must have been training for this specifically," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The push-ups and sit-ups followed a similar pattern. Sarah performed each exercise with mechanical precision, hitting numbers that put her in the top tier of the group. Her technique was flawless, suggesting muscle memory built over years of practice. But it was during the 5-mile run that she truly distinguished herself. While others struggled to maintain their pace under the weight of full gear, Sarah settled into a steady rhythm that seemed sustainable indefinitely. She didn't surge ahead dramatically, but she didn't fall back either. Mile after mile, she maintained her position in the front third of the group, her breathing controlled and her stride unchanged. "She's like a machine," Kelly panted to another recruit as they struggled to keep up. "Look at her. She's not even sweating." By the 4th mile, several of the larger recruits were starting to fade. The oppressive weight of their packs and the relentless pace had taken its toll. Marcus, despite his impressive physique, was beginning to struggle visibly. His breathing had become labored, and sweat poured down his face. Sarah continued at the same steady pace, occasionally offering quiet words of encouragement to struggling recruits around her. "You've got this," she would say softly to someone falling behind. "Just focus on the next step." When they crossed the finish line, Sarah was among the first 5 to complete the course. She stood calmly at the finish, her breathing elevated but controlled, while others collapsed onto the ground or bent over gasping for air. Crawford checked his stopwatch and made notes on his clipboard. "Not bad, Martinez. Competitive time." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, accepting a water bottle and drinking steadily rather than gulping desperately like many others. Marcus stumbled across the finish line several minutes later, his face red and his shirt soaked through with sweat. He looked at Sarah with a mixture of confusion and growing respect. "Where the hell did you learn to run like that?" "I've always enjoyed jogging," Sarah answered simply, offering him her extra water bottle. The weapons qualification took place that afternoon at the base's firing range. Recruits were tested on multiple firearms, pistols, assault rifles, and precision shooting with scoped weapons. Each person stepped up to demonstrate their marksmanship skills, while others watched and waited their turns. Most performed competently, hitting targets at various ranges with the accuracy expected of people with military backgrounds. A few stood out as exceptional marksmen, grouping their shots tight and hitting difficult targets with impressive consistency. When Sarah's turn came, she approached the weapons table with the same calm demeanor she had shown all day. The range master, a weathered Marine gunnery sergeant, handed her a standard 9mm pistol and pointed toward the targets. 20 rounds, various distances, he explained. Take your time, but keep it moving. Sarah examined the weapon briefly, checking the action and sights with movements that suggested familiarity. She loaded the magazine, chambered a round, and stepped up to the firing line. Her stance was textbook perfect. Feet shoulder-width apart, body angled, both hands gripping the weapon in a stable platform. The first shot cracked across the range, and the spotting scope revealed a perfect center hit on the 25-yard target. The second shot landed less than an inch away. By the fifth shot, she had created a tight cluster in the center of the bullseye that would have been impressive for an expert marksman. As the distances increased, her accuracy remained unnaturally consistent. 50 yards, 75 yards, 100 yards. Each target received the same precise grouping that spoke of countless hours of practice and natural ability. "Jesus Christ," the range master muttered, watching through his spotting scope. "Who trained you to shoot like that?" "I had good instructors," Sarah replied, ejecting the empty magazine and making the weapon safe with practiced efficiency. The rifle portion of the test produced similar results. Whether shooting standing, kneeling, or prone, Sarah's groups remained tight and centered. Her breathing control was perfect, her trigger squeeze smooth and consistent. She handled the weapons with a familiarity that went far beyond basic military training. By evening, word had spread through the entire group about the quiet woman who had surprised everyone. Conversations buzzed with speculation about her background and training. The easy dismissal of the morning had evolved into puzzled respect, tinged with curiosity. "There's more to her than meets the eye," Kelly said during dinner, watching Sarah eat quietly at a nearby table. "You don't develop skills like that overnight." "Maybe she was Special Forces after all," suggested another recruit. "Could be she's just modest about her background." Marcus, his earlier arrogance replaced by thoughtful consideration, approached Sarah's table. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his tone noticeably more respectful than it had been that morning. "Of course," Sarah replied, gesturing to an empty chair. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said, setting down his tray. "I made assumptions about you based on appearances. That was wrong." "No apology necessary," Sarah said with a slight smile. "First impressions can be deceiving." "No kidding," Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "I'm starting to think there's a lot more to your story than you're letting on. Navy, right? What did you really do in the service?" Sarah considered her answer carefully, taking a sip of water before responding. "I served my country to the best of my ability." "That's not really an answer," Marcus pressed gently. "Come on. After today, we all know you've got serious training. Where did it come from?" "Various places," Sarah replied, her tone friendly but not forthcoming. "I've been fortunate to learn from excellent instructors over the years." Marcus studied her face, looking for clues in her expression. "You know, I've been around military people my whole adult life. There's something about the way you move, the way you handle weapons. It reminds me of some SEALs I worked with in Iraq." Sarah's expression didn't change, but she seemed to choose her next words carefully. That's quite a compliment. SEALs are exceptional warriors. Yeah, they are, Marcus agreed. Toughest, most skilled operators I've ever seen. Takes years of training to develop their level of expertise. He paused, watching her reaction. Years of very specific, very intense training. I imagine it would, Sarah replied, finishing her meal and beginning to clean up her tray. As she stood to leave, Marcus called after her. Sarah, whatever your background really is, I'm glad you're here. I have a feeling we're going to need someone with your skills out there. Sarah turned back with that same polite smile. I hope I can contribute to the team's success. That night, as the recruits settled into their bunks, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically from the morning. The woman they had dismissed as an out-of-place civilian had demonstrated capabilities that demanded respect. But questions remained, and speculation continued in hushed conversations throughout the barracks. Sarah lay quietly on her bunk, reading a paperback novel by the light of a small lamp. To anyone watching, she appeared completely at ease, just another recruit preparing for sleep after a long day. But occasionally, when she thought no one was looking, her eyes would scan the room with an alertness that suggested constant situational awareness. Kelly, lying on the bunk above, leaned down to whisper, Sarah, can I ask you something? Sure, Sarah replied, marking her place in the book. Are you really who you say you are? I mean, a high school math teacher who just decided to become a military contractor? Sarah looked up at her bunkmate thoughtfully. I'm exactly who I say I am. I taught mathematics at Jefferson High School in San Antonio for 3 years. I have the transcripts and references to prove it. But that's not everything, is it? Kelly pressed. It never is, Sarah replied cryptically. We all have histories that shape who we become. The question is whether the past prepares us for what comes next. And you think your past has prepared you for this? Sarah closed her book and turned off her lamp, settling back onto her pillow. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. As the barracks grew quiet and the other recruits drifted off to sleep, Sarah lay awake in the darkness, her breathing slow and controlled. Her mind was already moving ahead to the challenges that awaited, running through scenarios and possibilities with the systematic thinking of someone accustomed to planning for the unexpected. Outside, the night sounds of the base continued, distant footsteps of sentries, the hum of generators, the occasional vehicle passing on nearby roads. Sarah listened to it all with the unconscious attention of someone trained to notice changes in their environment, someone for whom such awareness had once been a matter of survival. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new opportunities to reveal or conceal the depth of her abilities. But tonight, Sarah Martinez, former high school mathematics teacher, former Navy service member, and current enigma to her fellow recruits, simply closed her eyes and prepared for whatever challenges awaited. The tactical scenarios began before sunrise on day 3. Crawford had divided the remaining 18 recruits into 3 teams of 6, each tasked with different mission objectives in a mock Afghan village constructed on the base's training grounds. The village featured realistic buildings, hidden passages, and role players acting as civilians, hostiles, and local officials. Sarah found herself assigned to Team Bravo, along with Marcus, Kelly, and 3 other recruits including Jake Sullivan, a former Army Ranger with 2 combat deployments. Their mission was to secure a high-value target reportedly hiding in a compound on the village's eastern edge, while avoiding civilian casualties and extracting valuable intelligence. All right, people, Jake announced as they gathered around a satellite photo of the target area. As the most experienced member, he had naturally assumed leadership. Standard room clearing procedures. We go in hard and fast, neutralize any threats, secure the package, and extract. The others nodded, checking their equipment and reviewing the layout. Sarah studied the aerial photograph intently, her finger tracing potential approach routes and defensive positions. What do you think, Martinez? Marcus asked, noticing her concentration. Over the past 2 days, his respect for her abilities had grown considerably. "The main approach looks too obvious," Sarah observed quietly. "Single narrow alley, multiple overwatch positions, limited options for retreat if things go wrong. It's what they expect us to use." Jake glanced at her with mild irritation. "That's the most direct route to the objective. Speed and aggression are what win firefights." "Sometimes," Sarah agreed diplomatically. "But the backside of the compound borders that drainage ditch. Water level looks shallow enough to wade through, and it provides concealment from most of the defensive positions." "Through the sewer?" Another team member, Rodriguez, wrinkled his nose. "That's disgusting." "It's also unexpected," Sarah replied. "And it puts us in position to approach from their blind spot." Jake studied the photograph again, his expression skeptical. "The manual says to take the most direct route whenever possible. Don't overcomplicate the mission." "The manual also says to use all available advantages to accomplish the objective," Sarah countered gently. "Sometimes the best route isn't the obvious one." The debate continued for several minutes, with Jake advocating for the straightforward assault, while Sarah proposed a more complex approach that used stealth and misdirection. Finally, Marcus intervened. "Look, we're running out of time. Jake, you're team leader, but Sarah's tactical suggestions have been solid so far. Maybe we should at least consider alternatives." Jake's jaw tightened, but he nodded reluctantly. "Fine, we'll split the difference. Rodriguez and Chen will create a diversion at the front entrance while the rest of us circle around through the drainage approach. But if this goes sideways, Martinez, it's on you." Sarah simply nodded, checking her equipment one final time. Her gear was arranged with methodical precision, every item in exactly the right place for quick access. The others noticed how she moved with her rifle. The weapon seemed like a natural extension of her body rather than a tool she was learning to use. The exercise began at 0800 hours. Team Bravo moved out from their staging area, navigating through the mock village's winding streets while avoiding the watchful eyes of observer controllers stationed throughout the area. Sarah took point naturally, her movements fluid and nearly silent, as she led them toward the target building. "Jesus, she moves like a ghost," Kelly whispered to Marcus as they followed Sarah's lead through a series of narrow alleys. "I'm starting to think Ghost is exactly what she is," Marcus replied, watching how Sarah seemed to anticipate every potential line of sight and danger area. When they reached the drainage ditch, Sarah slipped into the murky water without hesitation. The others followed more reluctantly, struggling to maintain their footing on the slippery bottom while keeping their weapons dry. Sarah moved through the water with practiced efficiency, occasionally stopping to listen for sounds from above or scan for potential threats. "Contact front!" Rodriguez's voice crackled through their radios. "Multiple hostiles engaging from the main building. We're pinned down." Jake keyed his radio. "Copy that. We're 2 minutes out from flanking position." But as they approached their planned entry point, they discovered an unexpected complication. Additional role players had been positioned to cover the rear approach, and the hostiles were equipped with paintball weapons that would mark any recruit who failed to avoid their fire. "Shit," Jake muttered, observing the defensive positions from their concealed location. "They've got the whole backside covered. 3 shooters minimum, good fields of fire." "The mission's blown," another team member said. "We need to abort and regroup." Sarah studied the situation for several seconds, her eyes moving systematically across the terrain. "Not necessarily. Give me 2 minutes." Before anyone could object, she slipped away from the group, disappearing into the vegetation along the ditch bank. Jake started to call her back, but Marcus grabbed his arm. "Let's see what she does," Marcus urged. "She hasn't been wrong yet." What followed was a masterclass in infiltration and tactical movement. Using every piece of available cover, Sarah worked her way around the defensive perimeter in a wide arc that took her completely out of sight. The watching recruits lost track of her within seconds, unable to follow her progress through the dense undergrowth. 5 minutes later, their radios crackled. "Overwatch neutralized. You have a clear approach from the north wall." Jake stared at the rear of the building where the defensive positions had suddenly gone silent. "How the hell did she—" "Move now," Sarah's voice interrupted. "Window of opportunity won't last long." The remaining team members rushed forward, finding each of the defensive positions empty except for paintball markers indicating the hostiles had been neutralized. Sarah was nowhere to be seen, but they could hear movement inside the target building. When they breached the main room, they found Sarah calmly zip-tying the high-value target while systematically searching through documents and computer equipment. She had somehow entered the building, eliminated the remaining defenders, and secured the objective while they were still approaching. "Target secured," she announced into her radio. "Intelligence gathered, ready for extraction." The exercise controller, a Marine captain who had been observing from a nearby building, approached with his clipboard and a bemused expression. "Martinez, how exactly did you neutralize those Overwatch positions? My role players are claiming they never saw you coming." "Stealth and patience," Sarah replied simply, handing over the secured documents. "Sometimes the best approach is the one nobody expects." "And how did you get inside the building without triggering any of the alarms or defensive measures we set up?" Sarah glanced around at her teammates, who were staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to confusion. "Old building. Lots of structural weaknesses if you know where to look." The captain made several notes on his evaluation sheet. "Outstanding performance, textbook infiltration, and target acquisition. Where did you learn urban assault techniques like that?" "Various training courses over the years," Sarah answered evasively. "I've always been interested in problem solving." That afternoon brought the final phase of evaluation, a live fire exercise designed to test the recruits' ability to work as a team under stress. The scenario involved rescuing hostages from a building while under fire from multiple directions. Paint rounds and pyrotechnics would simulate the chaos and danger of actual combat. Team Bravo had been reorganized after the morning's performance, with Crawford specifically assigning Sarah as team leader for the exercise. Jake's expression showed his displeasure at the demotion, but he accepted the decision without open complaint. "All right, people," Sarah began, her voice taking on a tone of quiet authority that hadn't been present before. "The mission is straightforward, but the execution needs to be precise. We have innocent civilians in that building, along with multiple hostiles. Rules of engagement are weapons-free on confirmed threats only." She spread out a detailed building schematic and began pointing out key features. "Primary entry here, secondary exit routes here and here. Overwatch positions on these two buildings provide cover for the approach, but limited visibility once we're inside." The change in her demeanor was subtle, but unmistakable. The uncertain newcomer of 3 days ago had been replaced by someone who radiated calm competence and tactical expertise. Her briefing was thorough, professional, and demonstrated an understanding of urban combat that impressed even the most experienced recruits. "Kelly and Rodriguez, you're our Overwatch. Find elevated positions and keep us informed about external threats. Marcus and Jake, you're with me for building clearance. Chen, you coordinate communications and watch our 6. "What about casualty evacuation?" Jake asked, testing her knowledge. "Primary rally point here," Sarah pointed to a position 200 meters from the target. "If someone goes down inside the building, we establish security and extract as a unit. Nobody gets left behind." Marcus studied the plan, looking for flaws or oversights. "What if they have snipers in the surrounding buildings?" "Kelly and Rodriguez will identify and neutralize long-range threats before we make our approach. We don't move until the perimeter is secure." "And if the building is booby-trapped?" "We go slow and careful. Every door, every room gets checked before entry. Speed is useless if we walk into an ambush." The thoroughness of her planning and the confidence with which she delivered it left the team impressed and ready to follow her lead. Even Jake nodded approvingly at the tactical soundness of her approach. The exercise began at 1500 hours. Sarah's team moved out with Kelly and Rodriguez, splitting off to find elevated positions while the others approached the target building. The paint rounds began flying almost immediately, forcing them to use cover and concealment as they worked their way forward. "Contact left!" Marcus called out as role players began engaging from a nearby structure. "Multiple shooters!" Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. "Kelly, Rodriguez, neutralize that position. Marcus, suppressing fire. Jake and Chen, we're moving to the alternate entry point." The team functioned with remarkable efficiency under her leadership. Each member seemed to understand exactly what was expected of them, and Sarah's calm direction kept everyone focused on their assigned tasks. Within minutes, they had eliminated the external threats and reached the building's entrance. The interior clearing was where Sarah's skills truly shone. She moved through the building with fluid precision, checking corners and danger areas with movements that spoke of extensive close-quarters combat training. Her weapon handling was flawless, smooth transitions between targets, perfect muzzle discipline, and an almost supernatural awareness of potential threats. "Room clear," she announced after securing the first floor. "Moving to second level." The role players had prepared several surprise scenarios: hostiles mixed among civilians, booby-trapped doors, and complex room layouts designed to confuse and disorient the rescuers. Sarah navigated each challenge with methodical efficiency, her decision-making quick and accurate under pressure. When they encountered a room full of hostages guarded by multiple armed role players, Sarah's response was swift and decisive. Using hand signals, she coordinated a simultaneous breach from two directions that neutralized all threats, while protecting the innocent civilians. "How did you know to do that?" Jake asked afterward, genuinely amazed by her tactical acumen. "The positioning was wrong," Sarah explained. "Real terrorists would have kept better control of their hostages. These guys were too spread out, too confident. It suggested they weren't expecting a coordinated assault." The exercise concluded with all hostages rescued and all hostile role players neutralized. Crawford and his evaluation team approached with expressions of professional admiration. "Outstanding performance, Martinez," Crawford said, consulting his notes. "That was some of the finest small unit leadership I've seen in 20 years of training. Your team executed flawlessly under extremely difficult conditions." Sarah accepted the praise with the same modest demeanor she had shown throughout the selection process. Everyone did their jobs well. Good teamwork makes difficult missions possible. "Where exactly did you learn urban combat techniques like that?" Crawford pressed. "That level of proficiency doesn't come from basic military training." "Advanced courses," Sarah replied vaguely. "The Navy provided excellent educational opportunities." That evening, as the recruits gathered for what would likely be their final meal together before selections were announced, the atmosphere was markedly different from previous days. Sarah had evolved from an object of curiosity to a figure of genuine respect and no small amount of mystery. Marcus sat down across from her with a beer and a thoughtful expression. "Okay, Sarah, I think it's time for some straight answers. Nobody learns to fight like that from weekend warrior training or basic Navy service." Kelly joined them, along with several other recruits who had gathered to hear the conversation. "Come on, Sarah. We've all shared our backgrounds. What's your real story?" Sarah sipped her water and looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people had become more than fellow recruits over the past few days. They were potential teammates who would depend on each other in life-and-death situations. The question was how much she could reveal without compromising operational security protocols that still governed her life. "My naval service was more specialized than I initially indicated," she said carefully. I received advanced training in various skills that proved useful during my deployment. What kind of deployment? Jake asked. Where did you serve? Multiple locations, Sarah replied. Mostly classified operations that I'm not free to discuss in detail. Marcus leaned forward. Sarah, I've worked with special operations people before. The way you move, the way you think tactically, the way you handle weapons, it's not just advanced training, it's years of high-level operational experience. Special operations covers a lot of different units, Sarah observed, each with their own specialties and training standards. True, Kelly agreed, but some are more specialized than others, more elite. The group fell silent for a moment, each considering the implications of what they suspected but couldn't quite prove. Finally, Rodriguez spoke up from the end of the table. My brother was a SEAL, he said quietly. Served with Team 6 for 4 years before he got out. The stories he told me about their training, their capabilities. Sarah, you remind me of him. The way you think, the way you operate. It's not just similar, it's identical. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Your brother sounds like he was an exceptional warrior. He was, Rodriguez confirmed. And he always said that the teams attracted people who were different from regular military. People who could think outside the box, adapt to any situation, excel under pressure that would break most others. Those are admirable qualities, Sarah acknowledged. Sarah, Marcus said gently, we're not asking you to violate any security oaths or reveal classified information, but we are going to be working together in extremely dangerous situations. Don't we have a right to know what kind of person we'll be depending on out there? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. The operational security protocols that governed former Special Operations personnel were strict and unforgiving. But these people would indeed be depending on her in combat situations, and their trust could be vital to mission success. I served my country in various capacities for 8 years, she said finally. Some of that service was in conventional roles. Some was more specialized. I received extensive training in multiple skill sets that prepared me for a wide range of operational environments. 8 years, Jake mused. That's a long time in special operations, long enough to develop some serious expertise. It was educational, Sarah agreed with a slight smile. Kelly studied her face intently. Sarah, can I ask you something directly? Of course. Are you here because you need the money, or because you miss the action? The question hung in the air for several seconds. Sarah considered her answer carefully, aware that her response would shape how these people viewed her going forward. A little of both, she admitted. Teaching was rewarding in its own way, but it wasn't stimulating, and the pay for former service members in civilian careers isn't always what you'd hope. But there's more to it than that, Marcus observed. Isn't there? Sarah nodded slowly. When you've spent years training for a specific purpose, using specific skills to accomplish important missions, it's difficult to feel fulfilled doing anything else. Civilian life can feel like you're wasting your potential. The teams do that to people, Rodriguez said with understanding. My brother struggled with the same thing. Once you've operated at that level, everything else feels like playing pretend. Something like that? Sarah confirmed. Crawford chose that moment to approach their table, his expression serious and official. Martinez, I need to speak with you privately. Sarah excused herself and followed Crawford to a quiet corner of the mess hall. The others watched anxiously, wondering if their speculation had somehow gotten her in trouble. Martinez, Crawford began, I've been reviewing your file and I have some questions. Yes, sir? Your naval service records are remarkably sparse on details. Most of your performance evaluations and assignment histories are classified above my clearance level. That suggests you were involved in some very serious operations. Sarah remained silent, waiting for his point. "I've been in this business for 30 years, Crawford continued. I know what redacted service records look like when someone has been places and done things the government prefers to keep quiet. The question is, are you here under your own initiative, or is this part of something larger?" "I'm here because I need work," Sarah replied honestly, "and because this kind of work suits my particular skill set." Crawford studied her for a moment longer. "The company ran a more thorough background check after your performance over the past few days. What they found was interesting. Your security clearance history shows access to information and operations that aren't typically available to regular Navy personnel." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but internally, she was calculating how much Crawford actually knew versus how much he was guessing. "Sir, I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," Crawford said. "I'm stating facts. You have skills and knowledge that indicate a background in elite special operations, the kind of background that usually comes with ongoing obligations and oversight." "My obligations to the Navy ended when my enlistment expired," Sarah said carefully. "Official obligations, maybe, but people with your background often maintain informal connections, networks of former teammates who stay in touch, who sometimes call in favors or share information." Crawford paused, giving her an opportunity to respond. When she remained silent, he continued. "Martinez, I don't care about your past beyond how it affects this operation. What I care about is whether you're here as Sarah Martinez, former service member looking for employment, or whether you're here as something else entirely." Sarah met his gaze directly. "I'm here as myself, for my own reasons. Nothing more, nothing less." Crawford nodded slowly. "Good. Because the last thing this company needs is to get caught up in some interagency operation or government conspiracy. We run clean, legitimate contracts, no hidden agendas." "Understood, sir." "But Martinez?" Crawford's tone softened slightly. "Whatever your background really is, I'm glad you're here. The company can use people with your capabilities. Just make sure your past doesn't follow you into our operations." When Sarah returned to the table, the others looked at her expectantly. "Everything all right?" Marcus asked. "Just administrative details," Sarah replied, though her expression suggested the conversation had been more significant than she was letting on. The rest of the evening passed quietly, with most recruits retiring early in preparation for the final selection announcements the following morning. As the mess hall emptied, Sarah remained at the table, appearing lost in thought. Kelly, who had lingered to clean up her area, approached and sat down beside her. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Sarah looked up with a slight smile. "Just thinking about tomorrow, about what comes next." "Are you worried about the selection?" "No," Sarah replied honestly. "I think I'll be chosen. The question is whether that's actually what I want." Kelly's eyebrows rose. "Having second thoughts?" "Not second thoughts, exactly. But this conversation with Crawford made me realize that leaving one life behind doesn't necessarily mean escaping it entirely. Sarah, can I ask you something that's been bothering me?" "Sure. You're not really a former high school teacher who decided to become a military contractor, are you?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I was a teacher, for 3 years. I have the certificates and student evaluations to prove it. But teaching was what I did after my military service ended. It wasn't who I was before that." Kelly nodded slowly. "And who were you before that?" Sarah stood up, gathering her things. "Someone who had a very different job. Someone who learned skills that don't translate well to civilian life. Skills like the ones you demonstrated this week. Among others." As Kelly watched her walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was looking at someone whose real story was far more complex and dangerous than any of them had imagined. Tomorrow's selections would determine who moved forward to the next phase of training. But Sarah Martinez remained an enigma wrapped in competence and shrouded in carefully maintained secrecy. The question wasn't whether she would be selected. Her performance had made that inevitable. The question was what would happen when someone with her background and capabilities was unleashed in an active combat zone, and whether the teammates depending on her would ever truly understand who they were really serving alongside. The selections were announced at 0600 hours the following morning. Crawford stood before the assembled recruits with a list of 12 names, his expression giving nothing away about the difficult decisions that had been made overnight. The following personnel will proceed to Afghanistan for deployment with Blackwater Security, he announced. When I call your name, step forward. Martinez Sarah. Sarah stepped forward, unsurprised but maintaining her calm demeanor. One by one, the other selected recruits joined her. Marcus, Kelly, Rodriguez, and 8 others who had distinguished themselves during the grueling selection process. Jake Sullivan was not among them, his disappointment visible despite his attempt to maintain military bearing. Congratulations, Crawford continued. You leave for Bagram Airfield in 72 hours. Use that time to get your affairs in order and prepare for a year-long deployment. Questions? The selected recruits spent the next 2 days in final briefings, equipment issue, and administrative processing. Sarah completed each requirement efficiently, her paperwork always in order, and her questions focused on mission-specific details rather than personal concerns. On their final night stateside, the team gathered at a local bar near the base. The mood was celebratory but subdued, as everyone understood they were about to embark on something that could fundamentally change their lives, or end them. To the unknown, Marcus proposed, raising his beer, and to the team that's going to face it together. The toast was echoed around the table, but Sarah noticed the underlying tension in everyone's voices. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a very different reality, one where their training would be tested against people who genuinely wanted to kill them. Sarah, Kelly said, sliding into the seat beside her. I've been thinking about our conversation the other night, about who you were before teaching. And I did some research, called in a few favors with people who might know things about naval special operations. Sarah's expression didn't change, but Kelly noticed her posture shift almost imperceptibly. That sounds like a lot of effort for idle curiosity. It wasn't idle, Kelly replied. These people around this table are going to be my teammates. My survival might depend on knowing who I can count on and what they're truly capable of. What did you learn? Not much, but what I did learn was interesting. Kelly pulled out a folded piece of paper. Naval Special Warfare Command has a very specific policy about releasing information on former SEALs. Even basic service records are classified if the person served in certain units. Sarah remained silent, but her attention was now focused entirely on Kelly's words. The only people I know who check those security boxes are former Team 6 operators, the kind of people who did things that officially never happened. That's an interesting theory, Sarah said carefully. It's not a theory if it's true, Kelly replied. Look, I'm not trying to expose you or cause problems, but if you're really who I think you are, then having you on this team changes everything. It means we're not just a group of former military contractors. It means we have someone with capabilities that go far beyond anything the rest of us bring to the table. Marcus, who had been listening to the conversation, leaned across the table. Kelly, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that our mild-mannered former math teacher might have spent several years conducting classified operations in the most elite special warfare unit in the world. The conversation at their end of the table stopped abruptly. Rodriguez, Chen, and the others turned to stare at Sarah with expressions ranging from curiosity to awe. Devgru, Rodriguez whispered. Seriously? Sarah sighed and took a long drink of her water. Devgru is officially known as Naval Special Warfare Development Group. It's a classified unit whose existence and operations are not acknowledged by the Department of Defense. That's not a denial, Marcus observed. It's also not a confirmation, Sarah replied. It's simply a statement of fact about military policy. Sarah, Kelly pressed, I'm going to ask you directly, and I hope you'll give us a straight answer. Did you serve with SEAL Team 6? The table fell completely silent. Sarah looked around at the faces of her teammates, people who would soon be trusting her with their lives in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. The question was whether they deserved to know the truth about who would be watching their backs. SEAL Team 6 doesn't exist, she said finally. It was disbanded in 1987. But Naval Special Warfare Development Group does exist, Rodriguez pointed out. And everyone knows that's just the official name for what used to be Team 6. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, weighing operational security against team cohesion. Finally, she made her decision. If such a unit existed, she said carefully, and if someone had hypothetically served with that unit for several years, they would be bound by security oaths that prohibit discussing their service in any detail. But they wouldn't be prohibited from confirming or denying their general military background, Marcus suggested. Probably not, Sarah agreed. Kelly leaned forward. Sarah, are you a former SEAL? Sarah met her gaze directly. Yes. The single word hung in the air like a thunderclap. The implications were staggering. They weren't just working with someone who had special operations experience. They were working with someone from the most elite counterterrorism unit in the American military. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. How long? Marcus asked. 6 years active duty with the teams, 2 more in various training and consulting roles. What kind of operations? Rodriguez wanted to know. The kind I can't discuss, Sarah replied firmly, but the kind that prepared me for situations like what we're heading into. Kelly shook her head in amazement. A former DevGru operator teaching high school algebra. That's got to be the most overqualified teacher in educational history. Why? Marcus asked. Why leave all that to become a civilian teacher? Sarah's expression became distant. 8 years of that life was enough. The operational tempo, the constant deployments, the things you see and do. It takes a toll. I wanted to try living a normal life, contributing something positive to society. But it didn't work out? It worked for a while, Sarah replied. But Kelly was right the other night. Once you've operated at that level, everything else feels like playing pretend. I miss the real world, the place where decisions have consequences that matter. So you decided to go back to war, Chen observed. I decided to go back to work, I understand, Sarah corrected. Work where my training and experience can make a difference. The revelation changed the entire dynamic of the team's understanding. Suddenly, Sarah's exceptional performance during selection made perfect sense. Her tactical knowledge, her marksmanship, her leadership abilities, all of it fit the profile of someone who had spent years at the absolute pinnacle of military special operations. Does Crawford know? Kelly asked. He suspects, Sarah replied, but he's smart enough not to ask questions he doesn't want answered. And Blackwater? They know I have advanced military training. They don't need to know the specific details. Marcus took a long drink of his beer, processing the implications. Sarah, this changes everything. Having someone with your background on the team, it means we're not just another contractor unit. We're a team with world-class capabilities. It means you have someone who's done this kind of work before, Sarah corrected. But it doesn't make any of you less important or less valuable. Combat is a team sport. No one person wins firefights alone. Rodriguez grinned. My brother is going to lose his mind when I tell him I'm deploying with a former Team 6 operator. You're not telling your brother anything, Sarah said firmly. This conversation stays at this table. My background is compartmentalized information that doesn't need to be shared beyond this team. Why the secrecy? Kelly asked. It's not like being a SEAL is something to be ashamed of. It's not about shame, Sarah explained. It's about operational security and personal safety. Former DevGru operators are high-value targets for certain groups. The fewer people who know my background, the safer everyone is. The team spent the rest of the evening discussing the implications of Sarah's revelation. Their questions ranged from tactical to personal, and Sarah answered what she could while maintaining the security boundaries that had governed her life for years. When the evening ended and they returned to base for their final night, the mood had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a group of individual contractors thrown together by circumstance had evolved into a team with genuine confidence in their collective abilities. The flight to Afghanistan was long and uncomfortable, with multiple stops and transfers that left everyone exhausted by the time they arrived at Bagram Airfield. The base was a sprawling complex of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and constant activity that spoke of a war effort still in full swing despite years of operations. Their first mission briefing came within hours of arrival. Blackwater had been contracted to provide security for a convoy transporting medical supplies to a remote forward operating base near the Pakistani border. Intelligence indicated moderate threat levels, with possible improvised explosive devices and small arms attacks from Taliban forces operating in the area. Standard escort mission, the briefing officer explained, pointing to routes on a large map. 2 up-armored vehicles, 12-man security team, estimated travel time 4 hours each way. Sarah studied the route carefully, noting choke points, elevation changes, and areas where attackers might have tactical advantages. Her questions during the briefing were precise and operationally focused, demonstrating a level of mission analysis that impressed the Blackwater commanders. "Martinez," the operations officer said after dismissing the others, "I want you as convoy commander for this mission. Your tactical assessment skills are exactly what we need out there." Sarah accepted the assignment without comment, but privately she felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and concern that preceded any operation in hostile territory. Command responsibility meant making decisions that could save or cost lives, a burden she knew well but had hoped to leave behind. The convoy departed Bagram at 0400 hours the following morning. 2 heavily armored trucks loaded with medical supplies, escorted by 2 gun trucks carrying the security team. Sarah rode in the lead security vehicle, maintaining radio contact with all elements and monitoring intelligence updates from base. For the first 2 hours, the mission proceeded without incident. The roads were clear, local traffic was minimal, and the security team remained alert but relaxed. Sarah used the time to study the terrain and review contingency plans for various threat scenarios. "Pretty quiet out here," Marcus observed from the gunner's position. "Maybe our luck is holding." "Quiet is good," Sarah replied, scanning the horizon through her rifle scope. "But don't get comfortable. This is exactly the kind of area where bad things happen." Her prediction proved accurate 20 minutes later when the lead truck hit a buried improvised explosive device. The blast was enormous, lifting the front of the vehicle off the ground and filling the air with smoke and debris. The truck came down hard, its front axle shattered and its engine compartment engulfed in flames. "IED! IED!" The driver's voice crackled over the radio. "Vehicle disabled! We need immediate assistance!" Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. "All vehicles halt! Security teams dismount and establish perimeter! Medical team to Vehicle 1! But the IED was only the beginning. As the security team moved to assist the damaged truck, automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions. The convoy had been lured into a complex ambush designed to maximize casualties and capture valuable equipment. "Contact left! Contact right!" Kelly's voice shouted over the radio. "We're taking fire from multiple positions." Sarah assessed the situation with the calm precision of someone who had faced similar circumstances many times before. The attackers had chosen their positions well. Elevated terrain on both sides of the road, overlapping fields of fire, and multiple escape routes if the ambush went badly. Rodriguez Chen, establish base of fire on the left ridge. Marcus Kelly, suppress the right side positions. Sarah's commands were clear and authoritative, her voice cutting through the chaos of gunfire and explosions. Medical team, get those wounded out of Vehicle 1. The security team responded with professional efficiency, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The attackers had prepared the ambush site carefully, and their positioning gave them significant tactical advantages. "We're pinned down," Rodriguez reported. "Too much incoming fire to reach the casualties." Sarah made a rapid tactical assessment. The conventional response would be to call for air support and wait for extraction, but the wounded in the lead vehicle might not have that much time. Sometimes conventional wasn't enough. "Marcus, take command of the base element," she announced, checking her equipment and preparing to move. "Maintain suppressing fire on all known positions." "Where are you going?" Marcus demanded. "To get our people out of that truck." "Sarah, that's a suicide run. The whole area is covered by multiple firing positions." Sarah was already moving, her rifle ready and her gear configured for rapid movement. "Cover me for 30 seconds, then shift fire to the right ridge." What followed was a demonstration of tactical skills that none of her teammates had ever witnessed. Using every piece of available terrain, Sarah moved across the kill zone with speed and precision that seemed almost supernatural. She flowed from cover to cover like smoke, never presenting a target for more than seconds at a time. Halfway to the disabled vehicle, she encountered a concealed fighting position that had been firing on the convoy. The Taliban fighter inside never saw her coming. One moment he was aiming at the security team, the next moment he was unconscious, neutralized by techniques that left him alive but completely incapacitated. "How the fuck did she do that?" Kelly whispered, watching through her rifle scope as Sarah continued toward the burning truck. Sarah reached the disabled vehicle and immediately began extracting the wounded crew members. 2 were unconscious from the blast, 1 was bleeding severely from shrapnel wounds. Working with methodical efficiency, she applied emergency medical aid while simultaneously planning their extraction route. "I need covering fire on the left ridge," she radioed, preparing to move casualties to Rally Point Alpha. But as she prepared to move the wounded, a new threat emerged. A group of Taliban fighters had worked their way around to the convoy's rear, attempting to cut off any retreat route. Their position would allow them to attack the security team from behind, while they were focused on the ambush to their front. Sarah spotted the flanking movement through the smoke and immediately understood the tactical situation. If those fighters reached their intended position, the entire security team would be trapped in a crossfire that would likely prove fatal. "Marcus, you've got enemy movement to your 6 o'clock, she warned. "Approximately 8 combatants moving to flanking position." "We can't turn around," Marcus replied. "Too much fire from the front." Sarah looked at the wounded men beside the disabled truck, then at the tactical situation developing around her teammates. The choice was clear, but difficult. She could save these casualties or she could save the team, but probably not both, unless she did something that revealed exactly who she really was. "Keep working the front positions," she commanded. "I'll handle the flankers." "Sarah, there's too many of them. You can't take on 8 fighters by yourself." Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she moved the casualties to a more secure position behind the wrecked vehicle and began moving toward the flanking Taliban force. Her approach was completely different from anything her teammates had seen before, fluid, deadly, and executed with skills that went far beyond conventional military training. The first Taliban fighter never knew what hit him. Sarah appeared behind his position like a ghost, neutralized him silently, and acquired his weapon and ammunition. The second fighter turned to investigate his companion's sudden silence and found himself facing someone whose speed and precision exceeded anything in his experience. What followed was a masterclass in close-quarters combat conducted by someone who had spent years perfecting lethal skills against the world's most dangerous enemies. Sarah moved through the Taliban positions like a force of nature, appearing and disappearing so quickly that the confused fighters began shooting at shadows and each other. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez breathed, watching through his scope as Taliban fighters fell one after another to an opponent they couldn't even see clearly. "She's not human. She's like some kind of machine." Within 10 minutes, the flanking force had been completely eliminated. Sarah reappeared at the disabled vehicle, calmly collected the wounded, and began moving them to a safe position behind the convoy. "Flankers neutralized," she reported matter-of-factly. "Casualties stable and ready for extraction." The remaining Taliban forces in the original ambush positions, realizing that something had gone catastrophically wrong with their carefully planned attack, began a hasty withdrawal. The security team maintained pressure until the last of the attackers had disappeared into the mountainous terrain. As the immediate danger passed and medical helicopters arrived to evacuate the wounded, the security team gathered around Sarah with expressions of awe and not a little fear. "That was the most incredible display of combat skills I've ever witnessed," Marcus said. "Sarah, what you just did, that wasn't just Special Forces training. That was something else entirely." Sarah was checking her equipment and reloading her magazines with the methodical attention of someone for whom such actions were automatic. It was what the situation required. "Bullshit," Kelly said bluntly. "I've been around special operations people my whole career. What you just did was beyond anything I've ever seen. You took out 8 armed combatants in close-quarters combat without taking a scratch. That's not normal even for SEALs." Sarah looked around at her teammates, realizing that her actions had revealed far more than she had intended. Some SEAL units receive more specialized training than others. "DevGru," Rodriguez whispered. "You weren't just a regular Team 6 operator, were you? You were one of the Tier 1 guys, the ones who do the missions that don't officially exist." Sarah was quiet for a moment, weighing how much to reveal. "I served in various capacities within the naval special warfare community." "Sarah," Marcus said gently, "we're your teammates. We trust you with our lives, and you've proven we can trust you with ours. Can't you trust us with the truth?" Sarah looked at each of them in turn, seeing not just professional respect, but genuine concern and curiosity. These people had watched her risk everything to save wounded teammates and eliminate threats that could have killed them all. "I was with a specialized unit within DevGru," she said finally. "We conducted direct action missions against high-value targets, counterterrorism, hostage rescue, elimination of specific threats to national security." "For 6 years?" Kelly asked. "For 6 very active years," Sarah confirmed. "Multiple deployments, multiple operational theaters, the kind of work that requires skills most people never need to develop." Chen, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, spoke up. "Sarah, why did you really leave? Someone with your capabilities, your experience. The teams must have wanted to keep you forever." Sarah's expression became distant. "Because after 6 years of that life, I realized I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. The skills, the training, the constant exposure to violence and death, it changes you. I wanted to remember what it felt like to be human. But teaching didn't work out?" "Teaching was good for my soul," Sarah replied. "But it wasn't good for my sense of purpose. Those kids needed education, but they didn't need the kind of protection and security that my skills were designed to provide. This work, it uses what I'm trained for while serving people who genuinely need that level of capability." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "So you came back to war because it's where you belong." "I came back to work because it's what I understand," Sarah corrected. "And because the world is still a dangerous place that requires dangerous people to make it safer." The helicopter arrived to evacuate the wounded, and the convoy prepared to continue its mission. But the dynamic of the team had changed fundamentally. They were no longer working with a mysterious former service member whose background was unclear. They were working with one of the most elite warriors in the American military, someone whose skills and experience represented the absolute pinnacle of special operations capability. As they prepared to depart, Kelly approached Sarah privately. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For trusting us with the truth, and for proving that having you on this team means we're all going home alive." Sarah smiled slightly. "That's the plan. But Kelly, this conversation never happened. My background stays compartmentalized." "Of course," Kelly agreed. "But Sarah..." "Yeah? I'm really glad you decided to become a math teacher, because if you hadn't, you never would have been here when we needed you most." Sarah considered that observation as they continued their mission. Perhaps her path from the elite special operations community to a high school classroom and back to combat had been exactly what it needed to be. Sometimes the most valuable skills could only be truly appreciated when they were temporarily set aside. The convoy completed its mission without further incident, but word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the Blackwater community. Within days, she found herself being requested specifically for the most challenging assignments, her reputation as someone who could be counted on in the worst possible situations growing with each successful mission. But for Sarah Martinez, former DevGru operator and former high school mathematics teacher, the real satisfaction came not from the recognition, but from the knowledge that she was finally using her unique capabilities in service of people who needed them. The skills that had once seemed like a burden in civilian life had found their proper context once again. And in the dangerous mountains of Afghanistan, her teammates no longer wondered who they could trust with their lives. They knew they were working alongside someone who had dedicated her life to mastering the art of keeping others alive in the most hostile environments on Earth. The rookie they had initially dismissed had revealed herself to be exactly what they needed, a guardian whose capabilities exceeded anything they had imagined possible, and whose commitment to their survival was backed by skills developed in the most elite special operations unit in the world. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room was the one who looked the least threatening, and sometimes that was exactly what everyone needed to stay alive.